Good evening, wanderer. If you're here, you're probably searching for a story to keep you company as the night thickens. Something soft and slow to lull you into sleep. Or something just unsettling enough to keep one eye open. Let me take you somewhere far off to the salt-bitten edges of Vietnam, where the sea never sleeps and the wind carries names long forgotten. This is not just a ghost story. It is the echo of history itself, of young men posted on tiny outposts, guarding nothing but fog and memory, and of something else, older, stranger, that walks where the tide cannot reach. Now, close your eyes, or don single quotes. The watch begins. They called it Point Echo on the old naval map. A speck of coral, barely larger than a soccer field, surrounded by teeth of reef and the kind of silence that made radios crackle with static. There were no trees, no civilians, no signal towers. Just a watch post, a flagpole, and 3 men on rotation every 30 days. Private Nguyen Van Quang, 24, newly deployed, stepped off the patrol boat with boots to clean and eyes too full of light. The old sailors didn't say much. Just dropped him off with a jerry can of water, a box of instant noodles, and a tattered logbook, then turned and left. Quang stood on the crumbling dock, watching the boat vanish into the bright horizon. The island hummed, not with life, but with a stillness so deep it made his ribs tighten. The wind smelled of rusted metal and something older, something wet. "You'll be fine," his commanding officer had said. "It's a quiet post. Too quiet, if anything." They never told him why the watchtower had no windows, or why the last entry in the logbook was 3 months old, or why the only word scrawled there was Hung NGL, don't sleep. That night, Quang unpacked slowly. He arranged his things, the way he had been taught at the academy bedroll by the wall. Boots under the cot, radio charged and checked. He felt foolish locking the door. There was no one on the island but him. And yet, as the clock hit 3 a.m., a sound echoed up the metal staircase of the tower. Clink, 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 like a belt buckle tapping gently against metal, like someone walking. In boots, Quang held his breath. The radio crackled to life for half a second, just enough to spit out something low and guttural, a whisper, a frequency shift. He couldn't be sure. He grabbed his flashlight. It flickered, once, twice, then went dead, outside, on the sand. There were footprints, bootprints, marching in a perfect circle around the tower, but no one else had been there. And when the morning came, the prints were gone, not washed away, just vanished. Like they had walked back into the earth, ChatGPT said. Great. Here's the continuation of the unmanned watchtowers of the East Sea, with Chapter 2. Written in the same quiet, eerie, sleep-slow style, laced with historical eeriness and ghostly suspense. The sound that didn't come from the Ridokwong spent the morning pacing the island in measured steps. There wasn't much to explore, just 52 paces from the watchtower to the edge of the coral outcrop where the waves gnawed endlessly at the stones. A small cement bunker to the west had rusted so deeply its hinges cracked open like a coffin's lid. Inside were old rations, a water barrel with algae floating at the surface, and a dented helmet. He turned it over in his hands. The name etched. Underneath had been scratched out. At noon, he radioed base. Private Quang, reporting. Station secure. No sign of disturbance. There was no response. He repeated the call 3 times. The static answered him like a sigh. He wasn't worried. Not yet. The signal was weak this far out. The base would pick up eventually. That's what they told him. After all, stay alert, keep logs, report daily. So, he did. Day 1 log, 2:19:12 p.m. wind, strong. Eastward, visibility, clear. Unexplained footsteps around tower perimeter at 3 o'clock hours. No visual contact. Possible dream. We'll monitor. The second night came, like a veil, fast and quiet. As the horizon swallowed the sun, the island changed. The silence grew thicker. Even the waves, which had slapped the rocks all day, became strangely shy, barely whispering at the edge. Quang sat on the tower's upper deck, his rifle across his lap, notebook beside him. He stared at the blackness stretching in all directions. No lights, no stars, no planes overhead. Only the sound of the wind, curling like fingers through the slats at exactly 3 a.m. The footsteps came again, but this time they weren't outside, they were inside the tower. Tap, tap, tap. Measured heavy, 1 floor below. He stood frozen, breath caught in his throat. There was no mistaking it. The metal stairs echoed under weight. Not the wind, not a rat, not a hallucination. These were combat boots, and they were climbing, step by step. Quang raised his rifle. A bead of sweat slid down his neck. He shouted, "AI Co." No answer. The tapping stopped at the landing just beneath his floor. He held his ground for a full minute, then crept toward the hatch, hands shaking. He pushed it open, no one. But something was wrong. The old field radio, silent for 2 days, was now on, humming gently. The indicator light blinked red. It hadn't blinked since he arrived. Then a voice came through. Soft, slow, male, and speaking. An old dialect he barely recognized. Hio, nay, Kang Kon Ai San. Hung Gak Nia. This island ... has no living men. Stop standing guard. The voice faded. The radio went dead the next morning. He climbed down and found muddy footprints on the stairs. Human, wet, leading up but not down, as if someone came to the top and never left. He wrote in his log, hand trembling. Day 2. Log, 7:32 a.m. radio. Activated by unknown signal. Voice, heard. No response on return frequency. Language, consistent with Northern military dialect, 1960s. Possible transmission from base, or residual broadcast. Unconfirmed presence inside. Tower ... will not sleep tonight. The fog came in on the 3rd day. Not the gentle kind that hangs like silk over quiet water. No, this fog had weight, like it had been waiting far off at sea, and decided, with purpose, to crawl in and stay. By noon, Quang couldn't see more than 5 meters from the tower. By dusk, he couldn't see the edge of his own outpost. The sun disappeared without a trace. No amber goodbye, no sunset line, just white mist swallowing the sky. The silence had changed again. Before, it was the hush of a forgotten place. Now, it was the silence of something watching. He boiled instant noodles and ate with trembling hands. He didn't write in the log ... at 2:50 a.m. He turned on the radio himself. Just static, at 2:57. He thought he heard something outside. Soft, dragging sounds. As if boots were moving through sand just beyond his range of sight. Then, a knock, not on the door. On the metal frame of the tower itself. A single, heavy rap, followed by a breath, not his. It came through the vents. Damp, human. He snapped the light on. It flickered, of course. He rushed downstairs with his rifle, swung the door open, fog everywhere but in the distance. Maybe 15 meters from the tower, a silhouette. Man, standing still, tall, bareheaded, dressed in an olive green uniform, faded like it had sat decades under sun and salt. Quang called out, voice cracking. Soldier. Who are you? State your name and rank. No response. The man turned and walked into the sea. Not ran, not swam. Walked, step by step, into the water. Boots never breaking stride. Quang stood there until the waves swallowed the figure hull at dawn. The fog hadn't lifted, but on the steps of the tower, someone had placed a folded military cap, inside a note. Paper yellowed and soft with time. Scrawled in old handwriting, "We are still here. Don't let the flag fall." He didn't radio this in. He didn't eat that day. Instead, he sat at the windowless lookout, staring into the mist that refused to leave. He wondered how many others had seen the same thing, and said nothing. He wondered how many had gone into the fog. He wondered if he still would be here when the next supply boat came, or if he would vanish. Like the others, leaving only footprints and a cap. Day 3, log entry, not written, but later. In faint pencil, on the tower wall, I saw him. I know he saw me too. By the 4th day, Kwong had stopped expecting the radio to work, stopped waiting for the fog to lift, stopped pretending he could sleep through the hours between midnight and dawn. Instead, he cleaned his rifle 3 times that morning. He counted every grain of rice he had left. He sat on the edge of the cot and listened for something, anything that wasn't just in his mind. That afternoon, as he paced the bunker again, more out of habit than duty, he noticed something he hadn't before, a loose tile in the floor. It was small, barely shifted underfoot, but when he pried it open, there was a compartment beneath a shallow cavity of old concrete. Inside, a sealed metal ammunition box, caked in rust. The box had no label, only a single symbol scratched into the lid. A clock face, with both hands pointing at 12 midnight. Kwong hesitated, then opened it. Inside, resting neatly atop a folded cloth, was a wristwatch, old military issue, leather strap. Cracked glass, it had clearly been untouched for years. But it was ticking. The second hand moved, slow, deliberate, never missing a beat. He brought it closer. The hour and minute hands both pointed to 12 o'clock. He wound it back, just to test. Let's say 6:15. It ticked once, twice, then snapped back to 12 o'clock. Kwong checked the time on his digital watch, 16:43. He rewound the old watch again, 4:44. Waited, the hands ticked once, and returned again, to midnight. That night, just before sunset, he placed the watch on the edge of the bunk and stared at it, and when the first footstep echoed outside, he picked it up, only to find the second hand. Now moving backward, 1 tick per second. Towards something, towards someone. The knock came, not at the door, but under the floor, from the same tile he had opened. Knock, 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 dot. He didn't move, didn't breathe. The watch in his hand stopped ticking, and then, from the vent above him, a whisper, "Midnight never ends here." At dawn, the fog was thinner, just enough for the sunlight to smear across. The waves. Kwong emerged, blinking at the faint gold light. He walked the perimeter, trying to convince himself none of it had happened. But then he saw it, something buried in the sand, half exposed by the tide. A skeleton hand, curled around a rusted wristwatch. He dropped his own watch into the sea. But in the bunker, back beneath the tile, the ammunition box was shut again, and the sound of ticking. Still there, still midnight, day 4 log, 6:58 a.m. fog. Lifting. Retrieved unknown item from bunker. Object defies mechanical expectation. Suspect hallucination due to isolation, but entry ends abruptly. Last line scribbled. I heard the knock again. This time, it called my name. By the 5th day, Kwong had stopped asking questions, not because he no longer wanted answers, but because he feared the island might actually answer him that morning. The fog thinned just enough for him to see the edge of the island clearly. Waves gnawed at the limestone. Gulls circled without sound. He took it as a small blessing and decided to clear the area west of the bunker, a zone marked unstable on the original hand-drawn map. He brought his entrenching tool and started digging. He didn't know why, only that it felt compelled. The soil gave way to icily dry sand, loose gravel, then a hollow echo. He hit something. Not rock, not coral, wood. He cleared more, fast, his fingers shaking. Beneath the shallow crust of sand, hidden just a meter below surface, was a trench. A narrow, collapsed passage. Rotten support beams still lined its roof. Sandbags, decayed and brittle, sat slumped against the sides. On one was a faded number, 137 69ths, Unit 137, 1969. Quang knelt down, hand hovering over the opening. And that's when he heard it. A voice from below, not loud, not angry, singing a war song, a marching song. He knew from history books, once sung by North Vietnamese soldiers in jungle lines. The melody rose from beneath, like breath rising from a grave. Tin Lan, Kang Tik. G, try. The words stopped. Then another voice, different tone. This one whispered, NGL Rie, Kang, GGC, NGL, DG, J Jiao, Thing Hao. And then silence, deep, heavy, like someone was holding their breath beneath him. That night, Quang sealed the trench with sand again, but he could still hear it, every night. Around 2:45 a.m., the whispers began. Sometimes just breathing, sometimes the sound of a gun being cleaned, a mess tin clanking, a boot being tied, then always a knock from below, in the tower. He started writing again. Day 5 log, 7:21 a.m. Uncovered trench. Possible remnants of wartime structure, voice transmission from below ground, physical impossibility. No speakers, requests for reinforcements, immediate, but he never sent it. Last line written in another hand, as if someone else had borrowed his pen. Don't cover us again. We haven't finished our watch. At sunrise, the wind carried a strange scent, sweat, gunpowder, and iron. The flag above the tower fluttered harder that day, and below the island in the earth, the voices hummed on. Unfinished songs of men who never heard the ceasefire. Quang woke to the sound of dripping. First, he thought it was just a dream, the kind of noise that follows you out of sleep, like static clinging to the back of your thoughts. He blinked, up at the concrete ceiling above his cot. There were no leaks. The sky outside was still as bone. The last rain had been over a week ago, and yet, drip. The sound came from behind the tower wall. He sat up, his blanket clinging to him, with a dampness he couldn't explain. His undershirt was soaked at the back, and as he stood, his boots squelched faintly on the cement floor. Though no water had pooled, he frowned. He walked to the door, opened it. The air outside was dry. The island, as always, was shrouded in silence, except for the gulls screaming overhead and the soft crunch of sand underfoot. But inside the tower, the dripping continued by midday. The sound hadn't stopped. Twang traced it to the supply room, a dark space beneath the main stairs, where old gear and unused rations were stored. It was always cold there, colder than it had any right to be. He flicked on his flashlight and ducked under the rusted support beam, and there, in the far left corner, was a puddle, a perfect round puddle. It hadn't spread or seeped. It hadn't dried, it just was, still and dark and absolutely wrong. Above it, the ceiling was bone dry. He looked up, expecting to find a crack, maybe a pipe, maybe anything that could explain it. There was nothing. But then the drip came again, loud, wet, final, and hit him on the forehead. The flashlight flickered, his skin burned where it had touched. Just for a second, he staggered back, wiping his face, but there was nothing there. No drop, no trail, no mark, just the memory of it, cold and heavy. That night the dripping began again, but higher up, on the second floor, then on the third, and then the ceiling above his bunk. He couldn't sleep at 3 a.m. The radio turned itself on, But it didn't crackle with static this time. It gurgled, like water moving through flooded wires, like someone was whispering through a drowned throat. He grabbed it and shouted into the mic. "This is Private Quang Point Echo. Do you copy? Is anyone there?" For a moment, silence. Then, through the wetness, a voice, male.young, choked. Double quotes, "I drowned inside the tower." Quang froze. He stared at the radio, heart pounding against his ribs. "Repeat that," he said. "Identify yourself." The voice answered, clearer this time. There was no storm, no wave. "I drowned anyway. In the dry air." The radio died. He didn't log anything the next day. He only sat at the top of the watchtower, clutching his rifle, the radio, and the wet blanket that had never dried since that night. Then, just before sunset, he noticed something new. Footprints, but not in the sand. On the wall, small, bare footprints, child-sized, pressed into the inner concrete, not painted, not drawn, indented into the wall like something had walked up it. One step after another, all the way to the ceiling, and then stopped. He placed his hand against one. It was cold. He held it there for a long while, unsure if he was asking for comfort or offering it at dinner. He didn't eat. He boiled water but didn't drink it. He stared into the metal cup and saw the surface, trembled though no wind blew. Then he heard it again, drip, 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 but this time it came from inside the cup. He knocked it over in panic. Nothing. Spilled. It had been empty all along. The next night, he dreamed of drowning, but not in the sea. He was inside the tower. No water, no flood, just air. But somehow, his lungs filled, his boots floated, his hands clawed at invisible currents. The walls pulsed like waves. He gasped for breath, choked, reached for the hatch, and woke up on the floor, coughing seawater onto the concrete. Except, he hadn't left his cot. He had never left the top floor. There was no water. His clothes were dry. Only his lungs felt flooded. He didn't go downstairs the next morning. He sat on the roof of the tower, next to the flag. It whipped silently in the breeze, as if still saluting men who no longer stood below. He looked at the horizon, endless grey, and somewhere out there, the mainland, home, or whatever remained of it, in his memory. He whispered to the wind, who drowned here. The wind didn't answer. But the flag twisted suddenly, not in wind, but as if someone had grabbed the pole. He turned. No one, but beneath the flagpole, scratched into the cement by what looked like a child's finger, were the words, "Still watching, still sinking, still here." That night, he slept with the radio unplugged, the blanket folded, and the lights off. He wanted to see what came. And what came was not footsteps, but the sound of water rising, steady, constant, filling the room. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. In the pitch dark, he heard someone whisper beside his bed, "It never rains here, but we all drowned anyway." Day 6 log. Never written, but scrawled on the inside of the supply room door. If you hear the drip, don't follow it. Don't open your mouth. It's how it gets in, I think. I am water now. Morning came slowly, like it had to think about whether to return. For the first time since his arrival, Quang didn't wake to the sound of gulls or waves. Only a silence so thick, it felt like being buried in cotton. The kind of quiet that muffled not just sound, but thought. He stayed on his cot until noon. Not asleep, not awake, somewhere between. Eventually, hunger forced him up. He stumbled into the mess area, grabbed a can of stale crackers, and chewed mindlessly, while staring at the wall, the one where the footprints still lingered, now slightly faded, but undeniably there. He hadn't imagined them. He was sure of that now. What he still questioned was how much of himself remained real. That afternoon, the supply locker, the one with the dripping puddle, swung open on its own dot. Quang had locked it. He always locked it. He stepped forward. Slowly, the familiar tightening in his chest returning inside. Everything looked untouched, except one thing. A file folder he had never seen before. Olive green. Labeled in faded marker, .echo, March 1974. His breath caught. He carried it carefully to the table, laid it open like an offering, and began to sift through its brittle contents. Photos, old reports, typed memos with yellowing corners. None of it should be here. One photo in particular made him stop. Black and white, faded. A soldier standing beside the same flagpole atop the Watchtowers, young, thin, sharp cheekbones, tightly cropped hair, but the face. Quang dropped the photo, because it was his, not similar, not looks like him. Him, same eyes, same jawline, same mole above the left eyebrow. The man in the photo wore a dated uniform, rank unknown. He held the flag in both hands. Behind him, the sea stretched like a wound. On the back of the photo, someone had scrawled a note in pen. Nguyen von Quang, March 1974, raised the flag before the silence began. He stared at it for a long time, a very long time. Long enough for the light outside to change. When he finally looked away, the air in the room had shifted. It was colder now. The wind had stopped. Even the insects had gone silent. He turned to the radio. It was on, though he hadn't touched it. Soft, static, then a voice. But this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was clear, confident, young, and it said, "Private Quang, report." He froze. "This is Quang, I read you." "Who is this?" "Confirm location. Status of post. Point Echo, Solo Watch. No new arrivals. Found archival folder dated March 1974. Possible error in negative yaw in March 1974. He stared at the device, heart pounding. Double quotes. No. This is 2025. Silence. Then the voice said, more slowly, "You've been here longer than you remember." That night, the wind returned, but it blew from inside the bunker. Quang descended the stairs, with the photo still in hand. Each step echoed like a drumbeat. The puddle had spread, not just a circle anymore, but a slow trail reaching toward the back wall. He followed it, and found something he hadn't noticed before. A crack in the concrete, barely visible, but now open, wide enough to slip a hand through. And from within, the faintest glow, like moonlight underwater. He crouched, leaned closer. Inside was a room, small, square, lined with cement and iron bars. A holding cell inside. A figure sat hunched, over, unmoving, dressed in the same uniform Quang had worn since arriving. He raised the flashlight, hands trembling. The figure looked up. It was himself. The face in the cell matched him in every way, except the eyes. Those eyes were hollow, dead, no spark, no fear, only waiting. The mouth opened and spoke. "You held the flag. That means you stay." Then the figure dissolved into mist, and the room behind the crack collapsed into darkness. Quang stumbled back, heart hammering. The photo fluttered from his hand into the puddle and began to curl. He tried to retrieve it, but the water burned this time. Cold, like liquid ice. It hissed where it touched his skin. He staggered upstairs. The tower was dark, even with his lamp. He couldn't see the corners anymore. He sat on the edge of the cot and looked at the notebook, then wrote, slowly, Day 7, log 22:10 p.m. Archival photo retrieved, soldier identified. Nguyen van Quang, visual match with self. Temporal confusion. Identity fragmentation. I do not know what year it is. I do not know who I am. But I know the flag flies. And as long as it flies, I cannot leave. Last line scratched at the bottom, in a different hand. You're not the first, Kwong, just the next. The radio came, alive again before dawn. It was the third time that week. Kwang had not touched it. It sat on the wooden shelf, like it always did. Silent, old, harmless. A box of wires and rusted hope. But now it hummed, not the soft fuzz of atmospheric interference, nor the sharp burst of coded transmission. This was different. A low, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat, followed by a voice, male, calm, mechanical. This is Coastal Patrol, 712, Mayday, taking on water, bearing 106 degrees east by southeast, requesting immediate assistance. The signal repeated. Once, twice, twice 3 times. Always the same dot. Kwang sat frozen beside his bunk, staring at the device. He knew that call, not the voice, but the message. He had read it before, in a book, a list of lost naval units. Coastal Patrol, 700, reported missing in April 1982. Presumed sunk. Crew never found. He leaned closer, hand trembling, and replied, Coastal Patrol, 712. This is Point Echo. I read you. Please confirm crew status. A moment of silence. Then the voice again. But this time, different. We're still here, but we don't remember how we got here. Static, a gasp, and then something else, a second voice, in the background, barely audible. A whisper. It's not the water that drowned us, it's the watch. The signal, cut. Kwong stood slowly, the chill running down his spine deeper than the sea surrounding him. He took the notebook from his belt, turned to a fresh page, and began to write. Signal received. Origin, unknown. Content consistent with distress. Call from 1982. Conclusion, impossible. But nothing felt impossible anymore. Not here, at noon. The sun returned. It was a cruel, blank heat, the kind that bleached your bones from the outside in. Kwang stepped outside the tower and looked at the sea. Still. UNMOVING, like glass. He scanned the horizon. Even though he knew no boats would come, no helicopters, no rescue, he thought of home, but home had become abstract, a smell, a shadow, a rhythm in language he no longer trusted. The flag above the tower fluttered in the wind. He saluted it. He didn't know why. That evening, the radio turned on again, but this time it spoke his name. Private Kwong, do you remember what you promised? He froze. Who is this? No response. He grabbed the mic again, voice sharp. Identify yourself. That is a direct order. The voice returned, but it was not from the radio now. It came from inside the room. You said you'd never leave a post unmanned. He turned. There was no one there. Only the shadow of a figure on the opposite wall, not cast by him. A soldier, tall, helmet rifle, slung across the back, standing at attention. Kwong's breath caught. He didn't move. He couldn't. The shadow raised. One hand slowly. A salute, and then vanished. That night, he found a new folder under his cot, stamped in red. Archive Iron Terran, and side was a single sheet of paper. Typed, official, double quotes, notice of post-abandonment, Point Echo, date, the 31st of March, 1975, effective immediately, due to increased paranormal phenomena and the complete disappearance of stationed personnel. This outpost is to be rendered unmanned. All remaining forces are presumed. Mia, no further deployments authorized. This file is classified. Do not open. Signed. Naval Command. Below that, a handwritten line in ink, dated 2 weeks later. But the post is not unmanned. They're still here, and they still answer the calls. At midnight, the radio activated one final time. No voices, just a sound, knocking. Once, twice, 3 times, 3 times, from inside the speaker. Then, a voice almost human, almost mechanical, barely formed. Post 712, reporting, still afloat, still waiting. The static swallowed everything. Kwong closed the logbook for the night. He wrote nothing. Instead, he scratched one sentence into the wall, using the corner of his dog tag. They didn't drown, they were assigned forever. Day 8 log, not recorded. Found documents, contradicting current orders. Signal, from 1982. Confirmed post, not abandoned, only, inherited. Final note, written upside down at the bottom of the page. If the sea speaks your name, don't answer. It counts as volunteering. There was a room beneath the tower. Kwong didn't find it. Not exactly, it found him. It started with the sound, not the knocking this time, nor the whispers, or the slow drip of phantom water. This was scratching. Like nails across stone. Rhythmic, desperate, coming from below the radio console, where the floor met the wall. He got down on his knees, pressed his ear to the cold concrete. Sc rich. Pause. Sc rich. He grabbed a flashlight and scanned the baseboard. Nothing. Then he saw it, a faint groove, no wider than a paper edge, along the seam of the floor. A square outline. A hatch. There was no handle. No hinges, only an impression, like something that was never meant to be opened. Or perhaps never meant to be sealed. He pried at it with a knife. Nothing. He tapped. It rang hollow. Then, just as he gave up, the panel shifted. Not opened, shifted inward, and, behind it, darkness. A ladder descended into the earth. Old iron, cold. To the touch. Kwong hesitated. He didn't want to go down. He had no orders. No protocol for this. But then again, there had never been protocol for anything on this island. He descended, step by step. The air was thick, moist, not salty like the sea, but wet like breath, like a cavern that had been closed for decades. At the bottom, his boot hit cement. He turned his flashlight, and there it was, a room, a perfect square, 4 meters wide. No windows, no doors, no vents, no reason to exist. And yet, there was furniture, a cot, a desk, a metal shelf, and on the desk, a journal, leather-bound, dry, unlocked. He opened it. First page, private first class, Fem Min Tunu signed, point, Echo arrival, March 26th, 1975 status, alive. Second page, March 27th, no. Contact from command. Radio, still operational. Heard voice from upper floor last night. No other personnel listed on assignment. Beginning to suspect equipment error, or presence unrecorded. Kwong flipped through page after page. The writing grew. More erratic. Sentences shorter. Handwriting unstable. Dates began to repeat. He noticed the same entry written twice under different dates. March 29th, saw myself on the roof, waving to nothing. Asked myself what day it was. Myself said, it's still March 27th. I laughed. Then I cried. Then I watched myself vanish. Then the entry stopped, but the pages continued, blank, until the last one, written in red pencil. The handwriting no longer tunes, thicker, harsher, like a child or a trembling hand. Died, March 3, 1 buried. No wearing, forgotten, still assigned, still under watch, still waiting. Kwong clutched the journal tight and looked around. The room was silent, but on the wall, faint in the flashlight's beam, he saw something etched into the cement. No door, no exit. This room is the memory of the island. He turned to leave. The ladder was gone. In its place, a wall. He ran his hands across it, searching for the outline. Nothing. Panic bloomed in his chest like cold fire. He shouted, "No!" Echo. The air was thinner now. He turned in circles, holding the flashlight against his chest like a child holds a blanket. Then he heard it, Not from the wall, not from the journal, from behind him, a breath, wet. Close, you opened it. That makes you part of it. He spun around, nothing. But when he looked back at the desk, the journal was gone, in its place. His own logbook, open to a blank page. A pen rested beside it. Without knowing why, he sat. He picked up the pen, and he wrote, Day 9 log. Location, unknown. Possible, hallucination or spatial anomaly. Found evidence of prior personnel. Evidence suggests temporal distortion. I am not sure what year it is, or who is writing this, or if I am the first or the last. The wall behind him creaked when he turned. The ladder was back. He didn't question it. He climbed the hatch closed behind him on its own. And when he looked again the next morning, it was gone. No outline, no seam, just cold, unbroken floor. But the journal stayed. He found it back in his cot, wrapped in an old military jacket that wasn't his. And inside the cover, someone had scratched. Once a watch begins, it cannot be unwatched. The sound of boots on gravel returned on the 10th morning. Not at night. Not at 3 a.m., but at dawn. When light turned the sea into dull silver and the flag on the tower began its lazy morning dance. Kwong had risen early. He had not slept. Sleep had become optional. Now, a fading habit rather than a necessity. His body moved out of rhythm with time. The hunger in his belly no longer aligned with the cycle of day and night. He ate when the air grew heavy, drank when the whispers paused, and wrote only when he feared forgetting who he was. That morning, he stepped outside the tower and stood on the bare concrete pad that passed for a courtyard, and he heard it crunch. Crunch, crunch, not chaotic, not a chase dot, marching, dot, a steady, practiced rhythm. He followed the sound, stepping barefoot onto the sand. The grains were still cool from the night. He turned toward the bunker, and stopped, because there it was. A uniform, dot, moving dot, alone. It was the standard green khaki of the 1970s military, boots caked in dried salt. A helmet snug atop the collar, but no face, no hands, no man. The uniform moved as if filled by memory, arms swinging in perfect cadence, boots rising and falling in trained arcs. It circled the tower twice, then moved in a straight line toward the western edge of the island, where the trench had been uncovered days earlier. Kwong followed at a distance. He didn't call out, not anymore. He watched as the uniform paused at the trench. Sight now the sand disturbed only faintly. The uniform saluted, then turned, boots snapping to attention, and began marching again, this time back toward the tower. But halfway there, it stopped, and faced him, not fast. Not abrupt, deliberate. Kwang felt his skin tighten, his throat dry. The uniform lifted its right hand again, palm open, fingers together, a second salute to him, as if he were the commanding officer, as if it recognized him. Then the boots turned sharply and resumed marching past him, into the open door of the tower, up the metal stairs. Kwong followed. By the time he reached the second floor, the uniform was gone, but on the top step, folded neatly, were its contents: helmet, shirt, pants, boots, still warm dog tags, and a folded note. Day 103, still marching. Nobody gave the order to stop. Kwong sat down, holding the dog tags in both hands. The name had worn nearly clean, but under certain light, he could read it. FME 2N 1975, the same soldier from the hidden journal, the same man who had died and kept writing. He placed the tags beside the flag box and returned to the cot. His legs felt hollow, like his bones were eroding. He stared at the journal, not his own, not Chune's, third one, lying on the floor, open to the first page. Blank. He flipped it. Second page, blank. Third, fourth, fifth. Then, in the center of the book, a single entry, 2. Whoever stands this post now, you don't remember, but you've marched to dot, in circles, in fog, in silence. We are uniforms now, filled with duty, emptied of names. That evening, the uniform was gone, but outside the tower, deep in the sand, Quang saw fresh boot prints. Not one set 5 dot, marching in formation, and beside them, etched into the cement pad, where he had first stood that morning, still reporting for duty. Day 10 log. 18:27 p.m. Visual contact with non-human movement. Apparition consistent with standard military attire. Pre. 1975. Object saluted. Responded to presence. I may be the only one here, but I am not alone. Some watches are inherited. Some are volunteered. I no longer remember which mine is. Last line, written by a different pen. When the boots walk without feet, the soul follows. That night, Quang lay beneath the open sky. Not on the cot, not in the tower, but on the roof, next to the flagpole, his back pressed to the cool cement, eyes wide open, staring up at the stars. There was no moon, only constellations he could not name, or perhaps had once known, in another time, another uniform. For a long time, he heard nothing, no waves, no wind, no whispers, just the brittle silence of space, pressing down on him, like the weight of memory. And then, click, 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 a pattern, not from the radio, not from the tower, from above, from the stars. He sat up, heart racing. The clicks continued. He didn't recognize it at first, but something inside him trained, drilled, instinctive, responded. Morse code. He scrambled to grab the logbook, flipped to the last blank page, and began translating. Return to watch. The next line came faster. You are absent. Then colon, the post is never abandoned. Quang dropped the pen. His fingers trembled. He looked up again. The stars blinked back at him. No longer random, they pulsed. Not all, just a few, aligned, synchronized, dot, communicating. Not with the world, not with satellites, with him he'd stood. The wind whipped the flag hard, snapping it with fury. He turned to it, and for the first time, he noticed the cloth was tearing, thread by thread, as if being peeled away by something invisible. He rushed to grab the pole, as his hand touched the metal. A shock, a vision. Not a memory, not a dream. Something else. He was in the tower, but not now. Years ago, the walls were cleaner, the cot newer, the radio humming with voices, and around him, soldiers, not ghosts, not shadows, young men, laughing, eating, uniforms crisp, boots polished, the flag above them, unfrayed. They didn't see him. He watched as one of them, a soldier, with his face looked directly at the radio and whispered, "If we die here, we become part of the signal." Then, the vision collapsed. He staggered back. Hand burned. The pole was cold again, silent. But the flag was gone, vanished. Only the rope remained, still swinging from a wind that had stopped. He looked up. The stars had shifted, and the Morse code began again, this time, faster, urgent. He translated with shaking hands. Love is the only order left. Then silence, then save yourself. He returned to the tower at sunrise, unable to speak, not because he had no words, but because his mouth wouldn't open. His lips trembled, but the muscles refused to move. He sat by the radio, waiting for anything, for silence, for code, for his own voice to return. What came was a burst of static, and then a tone, sharp, long, a final Morse transmission. He forced his hands to record it, line by line, letter by letter, until the last phrase stood clear. You are the watch. That night, he did not sleep, he did not eat, he did not write. He stood on the rooftop, beneath the sky, staring upward, and this time, when the stars pulsed, He did not translate. He only whispered, "I understand." And in response, from the sea, the tower, the earth, the memory came one final click. Just one, a dot. The end of a sentence, dot, or the beginning of a new one. Day 11, log, 000I. Have received transmissions beyond known channels, beyond human, beyond time. The stars remember the dead, and they pulse their names in silence. They have read mine, I am not afraid. Written in the margins, you were always meant to return. You are not Kwong, you are the memory of Kwong. By the 12th morning, Kwong no longer trusted his own handwriting. The journal he kept, once neat, military pristine, had begun to change. Sentences he hadn't written appeared between the lines. Margins scribbled with phrases in a tone that was familiar, but not his. One entry simply read, "We see you seeing us." It started with a sound from the desk drawer, the one that had always been jammed shut. He never used it, never needed to, but that morning it opened on its own. Inside, not papers, not tools, but another logbook, identical to his, same leather, same yellowed pages, same date, marked on top. Day 12, but this one was already filled, and not with his thoughts. He read the first page. Day 12 log, 6:13 a.m. Subject, Private Nugent von Quan observation. Subject awoke at 5:42 a.m. Stared at ceiling for 6 minutes. Moved to desk without speaking. No intake of food or hydration. Emotional state, fractured motor coordination, deteriorating, signal susceptibility, high, visual hallucination index, stable. Subject now aware of post consciousness, risk of convergence, imminent. Kwong dropped the book. His breath went shallow. Someone or something was observing him from inside the post. Not ghosts, not memories, but the place itself. He picked the log back up, turned to the second page. Day 12, 8 o'clock am. Subject is attempting to rationalize findings. Begins pacing in forced-up pattern. Clockwise. Voice murmured, "I'm not real, or it isn't." Logged at 7:58. Identity destabilization progressing. Subject continues to refer to self as Kwang. Despite internal contradictions, Tower has begun passive reflection. Sentience reaching surface. Tower remembers everyone. His vision blurred. He flipped forward through dozens of pages. They documented everything. Every moment he had thought was private. His dreams, his hesitation on the stairs, the way he whispered the word home under his breath when no one was listening. Every act had been recorded by the Watchtower. He staggered away from the desk. The radio crackled. Not a message this time, just static, shaped like breathing. Then the walls began to creak. Not from the wind, from inside themselves, like they were shifting. Not physically, but perceptually. The dimensions of the room warping by memory, not matter. He reached out and touched the wall. It was warm, pulsing like skin. That night, he tried to burn the strange logbook. He placed it in a tin tray, struck a match. The flame caught, but the book didn't burn. It absorbed the fire, sucked it into the page like ink, and then the letters began to glow. Words appeared. "You are the final record, and the post has chosen to remember you forever." He ran down the stairs, out of the tower, onto the beach. The sea welcomed him with its silence, but no matter how far he went, the tower was always at his back. Watching, he turned. The windows on the upper floors glowed faintly. Shapes moved behind them, but no one was stationed there. No one but him. He screamed into the wind, "What do you want from me?" The answer came from the flagpole, etched into the rusted metal. "New since yesterday. We don't want you, we want your memory." He returned to the tower, not because he wanted to, but because he could not stay away. His bed was made. The radio was on, his old logbook lay open, and next to it, the observation log, still writing by itself. He watched in horror as the pen moved on its own. It wrote, "Subject has returned to position. Convergence approaching. At 3 a.m., memory upload will begin." He glanced at the clock, .02:56. He tried to run again, but his legs failed him. He fell to his knees, his hands trembled, tears blurred his vision. But he saw one final note written in the margin of the log. "You do not leave the post. The post becomes you." He collapsed beside the desk, unable to cry, unable to sleep. And when the clock struck 3 o'clock, the tower blinked. Not the lights, the tower itself, and everything Kwong ever was his name, his rank, his thoughts, his whispers. His breath was written into the walls, into the floor, into the next logbook, waiting for the next Kwong. Day 12 log, 3 o'clock a.m. Subject, fully integrated. Observation complete. Next watch scheduled, unknown. The tower is full. The tower remembers. The boats arrived at dawn. A grey patrol skiff, cutting across the sea like a blade through silk. On board, a new soldier, Private Lahayu An, 22. Transferred from Coastal Security Post 47B, he had never been offshore, had never stepped onto coral soil, had never heard of Point Echo, not in training, not in briefing. It was not listed on his orders. Just drop off supplies, the helmsman muttered. Maybe check the tower, then wait. They'll radio you. An saluted, shouldered his pack, and disembarked. The island was still. The sea was glass. The flag above the tower hung limp in the dead air. He walked up the concrete path toward the outpost. The tower loomed ahead like a scar in the sky aged. Grey, taller than expected. No birds, no sound, only the crunch of gravel beneath his boots. Inside, silence, but clean, maintained, food. Supplies properly rotated. Tools stored. Logbook open on the desk. Pen still, UNCAPPED. Anne looked around. "Hello, number..." Response. He checked the rooms. No one, no sign of recent departure. No heat from the bunk. Only the faint scent of sweat and old water. Then he looked at the logbook. Day 13, log 6:03 a.m. Subject arrival, confirmed name. Private Lahayu. Any emotional status, neutral alertness, moderate memory, compatibility, TBDHE. Blinked. What the? He flipped the page. Blank. He flipped back. The writing was gone. He stared. The paper was clean. He took a deep breath and stepped away. From the desk, the air shifted. The light changed. And in the top corner of the room, where there had never been a window, he saw a face, pressed to the wall, skin pale, eyes gone, not gouged, not closed, simply not there. A smooth stretch of skin where vision should be. Yet somehow, Anne felt seen. He stumbled back. The face vanished. He blinked hard, rubbed his eyes. Only the concrete remained, but it felt warm, like someone had just been pressed against it. He radioed the boat. No response. He climbed to the rooftop. The flag whipped once. Though the wind was dead, the sun beat down far off. The boat was gone. No signal, no engine. Just the island and the tower and the eyes that weren't there that night. Anne stayed awake in the watchroom. He read the old logs, or tried to, but most were eligible. Water damage. Ink bled through. Only one. Sentence repeated, carved into the inside cover of each. The watch remembers. Even if you forget. At 3 a.m., he heard something tap the wall. Once, twice. Then silence. He turned on the flashlight, scanned the room, and saw it again. The face. This time in the opposite corner, pressed against the ceiling. No eyes, but watching. He threw open the hatch and ran outside. The stars above blinked slowly. Morse code. No dot, just one pulse. A signal not from language, but memory. He fell to his knees on the sand, gasping, and behind him, on the side of the tower, a shadow stretched across the wall. Not his, a saluting figure. He returned inside just before dawn. The logbook lay open. New words appeared before his eyes, line by line. Subject An, accepted. Eyes will be removed shortly, so the watch can see. Day 13, log, 5:58 a.m., rival process.new. Watcher integrated. The previous memory has been absorbed. The tower thanks the flesh. The tower will now watch through him, carved on the wall behind the cot. We no longer need eyes, we have memory. It began with his feet, not his thoughts, not his dreams, not even his memories, which were already beginning to unravel like an old cassette tape left too long in salt air. No, it began with his steps, at exactly 6:17 every morning, and found himself pacing, 4 steps forward, 2 to the right, a turn, dot, repeat, 4 steps forward, 2 to the right, a turn. He hadn't planned it, hadn't meant to. It was as if his feet remembered something he did not. The first morning, he noticed the oddity. By the third, he stopped questioning it. By the fifth, he didn't even realize he was doing it until he looked down and saw the grooves in the floor, subtle, worn, smooth, forming a perfect loop, boot prints, thousands. Flaused deep into the cement over years, decades, of identical movement, and his feet fit into them perfectly. He tried walking differently, tried skipping steps, reversing the pattern, even sitting still. But within minutes, his legs would twitch, shift, begin the rhythm again, and the floor welcomed him. It felt like walking into a memory, no becoming one at night. The steps continued in his dreams. Boots on concrete, concrete on time. He dreamt of men who had marched that loop long before him. Young, old, alive. Fading, he saw their faces, or thought he did, but they blurred at the edges, like film peeled. Off by water, only the feet were clear, always moving, always circling. He began to hear a whisper when he walked, not from the walls, not from the sea, from the floor. Each time his boots struck the ground, a tiny echo would follow. Yes. Again, still here. Keep walking. He tried covering his ears. Didn't help. The voices came through his bones. One morning, he woke on the roof, boots still tied, uniform damp from morning mist, and around him a perfect trail of footprints circling the flagpole exactly 73 times. He hadn't known he'd walked, but he had, in his sleep. Or perhaps not asleep at all, inside the tower. More messages appeared, written on mirrors, carved into metal trays, etched beneath the bunk. Mattress, you are the path. The post walks through you. Memory needs muscle. He threw away the logbook the next morning. It was back on the desk, open to the current date. Day 14 log, 6:17 a.m. subject. Pacing confirmed. Integration at 68%. Memory transfer underway. Steps must not stop. If they do, we forget. He stared at the page, shaking. What happens if I stop walking? He whispered aloud. The radio answered, not with a voice, but with a single, sharp tone, followed by a recorded message. Last walker stopped at step 19,334. Memory corrupted. Body failed. Floor sealed over. He fell to his knees, felt the ground beneath him pulse, and then, suddenly, sink. He leaped to his feet. The dip in the floor vanished, as if the tower had threatened to swallow him for his hesitation. That night, he tied his boots tighter, drank 3 cups of instant coffee, refused to sit down. He marched until dawn, and as he did, the tower whispered more. Yes, he's learning. This one walks better. Don't stop. His body grew numb, his skin blistered, his soles bled. But he couldn't stop, because something inside him now whispered. To Dot, not just from the floor, from his own thoughts. The tower must remember, and you are the feet it forgot. At 3 a.m, he collapsed. His body gave out. He fell flat, head hitting the cement with a dull thud. And when he woke hours later, he was not alone. Another set of footprints had joined his smaller, lighter marching beside his for several loops, then vanishing, and carved into the floor next to where he'd fallen. You are not the only Anne, just the most recent. Day 14 log. 21 p.m. Subject has walked 23,112 steps. Floor responds well. Previous. Memory layers accessed. Echoes of older walkers detected. Path integrity. Stable. Warning. If pace stops, memory begins to rot. Carved into his boot sole, sometime during the night, though he never removed them. Walk or be erased. Anne began sleeping with his eyes open. He didn't realize it at first, but the burn in his pupils each morning, the dryness, the light sensitivity, told him something was wrong. Then came the dreams. No, not dreams, screenings. At 3:17 a.m. On the 15th night, Anne collapsed into a restless doze on the roof of the tower. The stars above blinked slowly, like an ancient projector warming up, and then a flicker. Not in his mind, in his vision, even as his body lay limp, eyes wide, face to the sky. He began to see, not his memories, someone else's. Image 1, a soldier, soaked in rain, clutching a rusted rifle, mouth open, screaming without sound. The sea behind him boiling with fog, boots marching behind him, but no one visible. Image 2, the watchtower in ruins, shattered beams, blood smeared across the cot, but the flag still standing, pristine, untouched. Image 3, the inside of the tower, viewed from the ceiling, from the point of view of something that does not blink. Watching men rise, sleep, cry, watching them write logs, watching them break, watching him dark, watching him jerked, awake, lungs full of salt air. He staggered to his feet, trembling. The flag whipped violently, despite the dead calm. He turned to descend the stairs, but froze in the reflective surface of the hatch window. His own eyes were still open, red dot UNMOVING, focused forward, as if watching something over his shoulder. He turned. Nothing turned back. His eyes, reflected, blinked once. That morning, the logbook was different. Instead of written words, it showed photographs, black and white dot, grainy dots, dozens of them, all of him, sleeping, standing, marching. And in each one, his eyes wide open, he rifled through them. Heart thudding. Some were dated before his arrival. Some were taken from impossible angles, from inside the wall or beneath the floor. One even showed him standing outside the tower, while he clearly remembered being inside. He shouted into the radio, desperate. Who's taking these? Who's watching me? The static paused, and then a soft, female voice. You are watching yourself. You are now the watch, and the watch never blinks. Then silence. The next night, he strapped his eyes closed with gauze and tape. He buried the photos. He covered every reflective surface in the tower. But when he awoke, the gauze was gone. The tape peeled and neatly folded on the desk, and on the ceiling above him, etched by some heat. Do not interrupt surveillance. From that day, every time he blinked, he saw flashes, snapshots. Not his life, but others. A man with a missing hand, writing in blood. A woman in uniform, saluting something. Behind her, that cast no shadow. A boy too young to serve, standing at the flagpole, mouth open in a scream. But no sound came out. And then he understood. The tower was not just a structure. It was a receiver. And he was now at screen, every night. It downloaded new faces, new failures, new watchers. It stored them in him. Day 15. Log, 4 o'clock AM. Subject has entered surveillance. Phase.visual data streams confirmed. Ocular override successful. Memory merge at 72%. Subject's pupils now serve as external monitors. That night, while washing his face, he saw a flicker in the water basin. He leaned closer. The reflection was not his. A man older, eyes burnt black, skin like wet stone. The man stared back and whispered, "Sleep is no longer rest. Sleep is duty." Then the reflection smiled. Not Anne, the smile belonged to the watcher. Before Anne began sleeping in shifts, 10 minutes on the hour, every hour, he left the lights off, let the dreams come. And when the stars began blinking their familiar code, he no longer tried to translate. He simply opened his eyes and received. Day 15. Midnight addendum. Subject no longer resists. Ocular interface. The watch now sees in all directions. Surveillance successful. Etched into the desk. Scorched by unknown heat. When you sleep, we remember. When you wake, we continue. It was the whisper in the floorboards that led him to it. Not wind, not insects, not the sea, but a precise, measured tapping beneath his bunk. Like fingers, like keys, like an old typewriter, refusing to stay silent at first. Anne ignored it. Another hallucination. Another artifact of too many sleepless nights. But it didn't stop. Every hour, on the hour, tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, he began marking the rhythm in his logbook. It repeated perfectly, every 60 minutes, and then, at midnight, on day 16, he heard something different, a clink, metal, sliding against concrete. He moved the bunk, lifted the floorboard beneath. There was no hollow, only a folded piece of paper, sealed with military wax, old, brittle, stamped with a red insignia, Vietnam, Dan, Chuck, Kong, HOA. 1973. He stared at it for a long time. He wasn't born until 2003. He peeled it open. Inside were 3 typed pages. The paper was yellowed, the font faint, but the header was unmistakable. Top secret for eyes of Lahayu and ONLY Point. Echo Watch directive. His fingers trembled. He began to read. 2. Lahayu An private. Unassigned date. The 12th of May 1973. You have been selected. This is not a punishment. This is not an accident. You have always been selected. Even before birth, the post awaits you. It has waited for many. Some walked. Some watched. Some tried to leave. Do not leave. Do not disobey. You are the memory we require. Anne dropped the paper. His chest tightened. He flipped to the second page. It was a checklist, typed with boxes already checked, though he had never seen it before. Arrived on post, accepted the watch, opened the eye, walked the memory path, slept while receiving, acknowledged the orders, completed convergence. At the bottom, pending final step. The third page was blank, except for a single line, typed across the center. You will sign your own orders. You always have. He stumbled back. The room spun. He gripped the edge of the cot, trying to breathe. On the wall beside him, new words had been carved, not by hand, pressed, letter by letter, like from a typewriter pushed through concrete. We never sent them. You wrote them. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat at the desk, placed the 3 pages in front of him, and found, without explanation, a typewriter waiting. Old rusted keys, engraved in both Vietnamese and English. It hadn't been there before. He stared at it for an hour, then, slowly, placed his fingers on the keys. They fit perfectly, and before he could stop himself, his hands began to type. Not random words, not panic. Orders. Continue surveillance. Subject is stable, will remain until replacement. Arrives. If no replacement, memory loop resumes. Flag must remain, post must remain, self must remain. He typed until sunrise, when it ended. The machine rang softly. Ding-dong. He looked down. His name had been typed at the bottom. Authorized by Lahayu. He hadn't meant to, but the name was there, in his handwriting, in his silence, in the weight of his blood. He folded the new orders, placed them beneath the cot, sealed them in wax, and waited. Day 16, log, 6:05 a.m. Orders, acknowledged. Timeline, stabilized. Subject, now understands the loop. Loop is not a prison. Loop is the post. Loop is the watch. That afternoon, he walked to the western edge of the island, buried the new orders under a white stone, marked it with a BOOTPRINT, and whispered, "If anyone ever finds this, don't read it, burn it, and run." But far behind him, in the tower, the typewriter began to click again. No fingers, no hands, just memory, filling in the next name. It started with the logbook. The name on the front cover had changed. Where it once read, Lahayu, A.N., private first. CLSS. Now it read, Fum, Vangisi, Watch, COMMANDRN, blinked. He rubbed his eyes, looked again, still there. But the strange thing was, he didn't feel surprised. Later that morning, he brewed a cup of instant coffee, the kind stored in the tower rations for decades. Stale and bitter. As he drank it, the mug in his hand trembled slightly. Not from wind, not from nerves, but because someone had etched a name into the porcelain. PV. Same. Name. Same initials. He walked to the mirror above the desk, looked at himself. Same hair, same uniform, same pale skin, but in his eyes, something unfamiliar. He leaned closer and saw it faintly, right at the edge of his left pupil. A name, not in blood, not in ink, burned in light. PHMVAN. Duke stumbled back, bumped into the desk. The typewriter clacked once, unprompted. A page fed itself forward, and a single line appeared. "Welcome back, Commander." He grabbed the logbook. Flipping through, all entries had shifted. Where they once referred to Private Anne, they now called him Commander GC. Not one mention of the name Anne remained, as if the tower itself had revised its memory, and maybe revised him too. He tried to remember his parents, names. His birth date, his military assignment, but the details, blurred. Dates dissolved, words reversed. He looked at his own ID tag and found nothing, just a silver plate, blank, at 3 o'clock. P.M. The radio buzzed to life. Not a voice, a report, automated, monotone, chilling. Watch Commander, Pham Van GC. Point echo status. Stable. Subject shows 94%. Assimilation. Former identity. Scrubbed. Resistance. Minimal. Remaining task. Memory merge. With previous cycles, Anne tried to respond. Tried to say, "I'm not GC." But the words that came from his mouth were, "Copy." Proceeding with standard protocol. That night, the stars pulsed again, not blinking. Scanning. He walked the perimeter of the island, but each step felt lighter, like he was shedding something. His gait changed, his rhythm shifted. His boots no longer fit his feet, they fit someone else's. When he looked at his reflection in the glass of the tower's signal console, it smiled first, then saluted, then said, without moving its lips, "We remember you now, because you've always been us." He collapsed onto the floor, shaking, tried to write his real name, tried to scratch an into the wall with his thumbnail, but the moment he wrote the A, it reversed itself, became a G, then an O. Then, GC. In his final resistance, he tore open the bunk mattress, ripped the stuffing apart, and deep inside, tucked in plastic, a photograph. Black and white. Water dash. Warped, but clear enough, it showed a man standing on the beach. At Point Echo. Saluting the flag. His face, not Anne's, not entirely, but almost. And scrawled on the back, Fem van GC, Kia, 1975. Still reporting. He laughed, or cried, or both, he no longer knew. But at 3 a.m., he stood, put on the uniform, folded neatly at the foot of the bed, and walked to the rooftop. The flag was already raised. The stars were already blinking. The wind whispered a name. And this time, he turned and said, "Yes, I remember." And the tower whispered back, "Then you may remain." Day 17, log 3:01 a.m. Identity. Convergence, successful. Memory threads aligned. Subject now fully integrated as Watch Commander GC Loop. Sustained flag status. Secured. Tower. Remains whole. Etched into the underside of the bed frame. You do not inherit a name. The post assigns it until it forgets you, or becomes you. The fog came in without warning. Not at night, not at dawn, but at exactly 11:11 a.m. Under a cloudless sky, it didn't roll in from the sea. It rose from the ground. A soft bloom of white vapor, swirling up through cracks in the cement, creeping along. The edges of the bunker, seeping into the tower's vents like breath held too long and finally exhaled. By 11:17, Anne, or whatever remained of him, could no longer see more than a few steps ahead. The island had vanished. The sea was gone. Even the flagpole was now a ghost. And inside the white silence, a voice began to speak. At first, just syllables, disconnected, unsteady, floating through the mist like feathers soaked in water. Then the syllables formed names, whispered, in order. Fem, Van Toon, Enjum, Engahu, Kan, Levan Nan, Turn. Tn, JTB, Hon, Si. Each name echoed twice. Once from the left, then again from the right, and then, once inside his own skull, he stood perfectly still. The tower behind him was gone, swallowed in white. Only the voice remained. Names upon names upon names. Some he'd read in old logbooks, some carved into the floor, some he'd never heard. But one made his chest seize. Lahayu An. The fog paused, held its breath, and repeated, Lahawiyan. An blinked. He tried to step back, but the fog moved with him. A wall, a voice, a memory. Lahawiyan. Then another name. Fem, Ven GC. And then another, and another. A list of names that should not exist together. Men from different wars, different decades, all whispered in the same tone. By the same voice he covered his ears. It didn't help. The names whispered inside him now, coiling round his ribs, pressing into his bones. Calling roll, Lahayu An, the voice said again, then asked softly, "Why weren't you on the list?" He froze. "I was," he whispered. The fog trembled. Double quotes, "No. Your name was added later." A gust of cold air passed through him. The mist churned in place, then began to twist, rising up in long vertical columns. From each, a figure took form. Silhouettes. In uniform, all headless, all barefoot. Each one held a name tag in its hand, but none bore his. He stepped back. One of the figures turned, its body toward him, then another, then a third. Soon, all of them were facing him. Name tags lifting. Empty spaces where faces should be, and the fog, now thick and humming, whispered, "Name yourself, so we can remember you, or else we will forget you forever." He opened his mouth, but the name Anne would not come. It tasted wrong, unfamiliar, like a lie. He tried GC. It came out backwards, C cod. The fog hissed. No name, no memory, no return. He collapsed to the ground, and as he fell, his hand struck something solid beneath the sand. He clawed at it, desperate. Uncovered a metal plate. Dog tags old. Rusted. Inscribed. Hayuankia, unknown data remains. Never recov red. His hands trembled. The plate burned against his skin. But the moment he touched it, the fog stopped. The figures froze. The air held its breath. And then, all at once, the names began to repeat. But in his voice, Fem Van Tuen, Enge, Hookah, NH.T, Rayan, Tien Jate. All the names through his lips, even those he did not know, as if the tower was now reading through him. By the time the fog lifted, he was on his knees, eyes open, mouth silent. But in his mind, the list continued, never-ending. A roll call of the forgotten that night. The tower's walls pulsed with heat, and the radio whispered, "The names are safe now. You are the vessel, the list is within." And for the first time in days, he smiled. Because, for a moment, he knew who he was. Not Anne, not GC, but the one who remembers. Day 18, log, 0 o'clock. Fog event, recorded. 147 names. Recited, name of subject, confirmed as anomaly. Subject has no verified. Death date, status. Remembering. Etched under the table in rough script. You don't die on Point Echo. You are merely forgotten. Until the fog remembers you. At 5:32 p.m., the sun hit the western lip of the sea. A quiet dusk, the kind that usually paints things gold, but not here, not on Point. Echo Ont stood outside the tower, leaning against the wall, eyes narrowed at the horizon. There were no clouds, no mist, just pure, clean sunlight. But as he looked down, he cast no shadow. He blinked, shifted slightly. Nothing, no silhouette stretched. Across the sand, no outline against the tower wall. He held out his hand. Still nothing. Even the flagpole had gone. Flat, motionless, light touching it. But casting no line behind, he ran to the eastern side of the island, kicked over a water canister. Held it upright, stepped back. No shadow. He waved his arm above it. Nothing. The sunlight was real. The physics not. Something had changed. Back inside the tower, he lit a lamp, held his hand against the flame. The glow touched him, warmed his skin. But the wall behind, blank. He scrawled in the logbook. Light present, shadow absent, reality unhinged. Then paused, because the lamp flickered, and for a brief second, a shadow did appear. But not his. It was smaller, shoulders narrow, head tilted unnaturally. It blinked into existence, for just a blink, then vanished. He stood, frozen, turned around. No one, but he felt it. A sensation like being stared at from below. At 6:03 p.m., the sun vanished beyond the sea, and then the shadows returned. All at once, but still not his. They moved across the sand, in formation, marching, but without feet, each shadow precise. Military. A platoon of nothingness, cast against a world that refused to admit they existed. He followed them, out past the tower, to the northwestern ridge, where no trails had ever formed, where no man had walked. There, the shadows stopped. All of them, lined up, shoulder to shoulder, facing something. Anne turned to follow their gaze, and saw a door. Not real, just an outline in the rock, blacker than the evening sky. But every shadow lifted its right hand, and saluted. He stepped closer. His body trembled. He lifted his own hand, hesitantly, and his shadow did not follow. Instead, it saluted first, then stepped forward, detached from his feet, and entered the doorway. He collapsed, woke, hours later, in his cat, shaking. His shadow had returned. but now it moved slightly behind him, a half-second delay, like it was thinking before it followed. He tested it, waved his hand. The shadow hesitated, then copied, spoke aloud. The mouth of the shadow moved after his voice. He stepped away from the lantern. The shadow did not. It remained, staring at him, unmoving, and then, slowly, smiled. He tore down every light source in the tower, lived in darkness, but still, from the edge of the walls, he saw flickers of a man-shaped darkness, moving when he wasn't, waving when he cried at midnight. He checked the logbook. It had been written in by someone else. Day 19 log, 0 o'clock. Subject's shadow is now autonomous. Phase 4, externalization successful. Shadow will complete duties when subject forgets. Shadow remembers. Orders. Subject no longer required to move. Scrawled at the bottom. Do not step into light. It no longer belongs to you. The next day he tried. He stood in full daylight, waited for the sun to touch him, and it did. But the shadow walked away, left him standing, alone, bright, visible, hollow, and from then on, he cast no shadow at all, but one always stood nearby, watching, saluting, waiting for its turn to remember. It came at 3:33 a.m., the exact moment Anne had stopped expecting anything. The radio had been silent for 3 nights. No static, no voices, no code, just the quiet hum of wires like an old heart refusing to beat. Then a click, soft, mechanical, almost polite, followed by a sound he hadn't heard in weeks. A human voice, but not a distress call, not coordinates, not military code. A single sentence, spoken slowly. It's your turn now. Are you ready to come in? Anne didn't reply. He couldn't. His lips were cracked, sealed with salt. His hands too weak to lift the mic. But the voice continued anyway. You've seen enough, walked enough, carried the names, held the watch. Then silence, then music, a scratchy vinyl soft recording, faint piano notes, out-tuned brass, a slow waltz. Something from the 1960s. It played for exactly 1 minute and 45 seconds. Then the voice returned. We'll open the door now. You don't have to knock. He staggered to the top of the tower. Looked out. Nothing. No boats, no signal flares. Only the sea, still and dark, and too calm. But then he saw it. A light, faint, orange. Not from the mainland, not from the sky. It floated above the water, just off the reef line, wobbling gently, like a lantern in someone's hand. It blinked once, then again, then pulsed in rhythm. With his heartbeat, he turned to the flag. It was gone in its place. The radio somehow mounted to the pole, wires hanging like wet roots, the speaker now facing the sea. From it, the voice returned. This time quieter, intimate. This is not an evacuation, this is an invitation. He whispered, to where? The speaker crackled. To where the watchers go, when they've watched too long. He looked back at the water now. 3 lights, forming a triangle, bobbing, waiting. He descended the tower, barefoot, the sand warm. Beneath him, the air still. Not a single wave broke. He walked toward the lights as he approached the shore. The radio, still somehow on the tower roof, followed him. Its signal carried over the wind. All stations complete. The watch remains. But the watcher may rest. The lights blinked once, twice, then drifted closer to shore, revealing themselves. Not boats, not drones. Helmets, military helmets, floating, upright, inside each. A flame, burning without fuel. Anne stood at the edge of the water, and the sea whispered, we remember who you were, now become who you are. He stepped in. The water reached his ankles, then his knees. then his chest. Still warm, still silent. The helmets circled him. He opened his mouth to speak, and the water filled it gently. No drowning, no panic. No panic, only warmth and darkness. And then, light, day 20 log. 4 o'clock a.m., subject has TRANSITION, ED. Memory absorbed, watch. Sustained, new name, pending. Post, remains active. Carved into the inner wall of the tower. Newly visible, the last broadcast is not a goodbye. It is a passing of the torch. And on the desk, where the logbook once sat, a new folder, blank, waiting, titled. For the next arrival, the new arrival was named Nugent Dai Thick Age, 20-3. Hometown, Nam Hun. Assignment, temporary station, Point Echo, supply. Rotation. He didn't know where the island was. Didn't ask, didn't question why he was going alone. When he boarded the skiff at 4:45 a.m. The sailor only said, "Someone will be there." He didn't say who. Thux stepped onto the beach just after sunrise. The sand was warm, though the wind bit. The tower stood waiting, silent, proud. As if frozen mid-salute. No footprints, no voices, but the door was unlocked. He entered slowly, inside. Everything clean, organized. The desk was set, the cot made, the kettle warm, and on the table, centered beneath the single flickering lamp, a logbook, open, already titled, Private. Nugent Dai Thick Point, Echo Log. He frowned. I haven't written that yet. He turned the page and saw his own handwriting. Day 1 log, 6:05 a.m. Rival complete. Winds light, visibility high. Tower shows no signs of recent occupation, though it feels lived in. I am alone, I think. Thutsk blinked. It was his script. Every loop, curve, mistake, exactly as he'd write it. But he hadn't, not yet. He flipped to day 2. Then day 3, all written, each page with more entries. More details, thoughts he hadn't yet had, but recognized. Heard a noise from under the cot. Woke up facing the mirror, though I hadn't placed one there. Smelled cigarette smoke. I don't smoke. On day 7, he found. Name started to feel strange in my mouth, like it belonged to someone else. He ran to the mirror, stared at himself. Same face, same scars, same tired eyes. But the name, Nugent Dai Thick, echoed strangely in his mind, as though he were quoting a stranger. He returned to the logbook, skipped ahead to day 14, and there it was discovered. Logbook already filled. Exact replica of my handwriting. Fear settled deeper than my skin. Then, below that, in a different ink, if you're reading this, it means you just arrived. He turned the page, blank, just a single line at the top. Continue the memory. That night, he tried writing. He copied day 1 again, out of defiance. But, the moment he set down the pen, the page rearranged. Lines shifted. Dates corrected. Tone matched the original. It had. Self-corrected. He flipped the book shut, set it aside, then found, in the drawer, a second copy. Identical. Same name, same script, same future. He tried tearing it up. The pages reappeared. He tried burning it. The flame went out. He buried it under the sand. Found it on his pillow the next morning at 3 a.m. The radio clicked on. Static hissed. Then, a voice, male, low, weathered. Hello, Thick. You don't remember me, but I remember you. Thick grabbed the mic. Who is this? I read the logbook too. I was once in art before that, GC. Before that, nothing. A long pause. You're not here to write history. You're here to become it. The transmission ended. The light flickered outside. The fog was returning. He opened the logbook again. turned to day 21. And there, already waiting. In his hands future, day 21 log, 000, I have found the book. The book has found me. I am not the first. I am not the last. I will finish what was written, even if I never began it, etched into the spine of the logbook. Barely visible, no one ever writes the log writes them. It began with the sound. Not voices, not footsteps, not the scratching Anne once heard, but breathing, slow, rhythmic, heavy, like a man asleep. Under floorboards, lungs full of sea air and memory, thick first. Noticed it on day 4, when he leaned against the north wall of the tower. He felt the faintest rise and fall, a pulse beneath the concrete. Not seismic, not structural, organic. He pressed his ear against it. The wall exhaled. Warm asterisk. Not like the wind. Not like a draft, like a chest. That night, he didn't sleep. He laid on the cat, watching the corners of the ceiling swell and shrink, as if the entire room were breathing with him. Inhale, exhale, exhale, like someone trying to match his rhythm. Or worse, making him match theirs at 3 a.m. The radio activated again. It didn't speak, it sighed. A long, wet breath, followed by a voice, barely audible. The tower is tired. It has inhaled too many names. He whispered, "What is it inhaling now?" The voice replied, "You." He checked the logbook. Day 5, already filled in. Subject has synchronized with respiration. Tower now breathes through occupant. Lungs are memory storages. Inhale, absorption. Exhale, forgetting. His hands trembled. He placed them on the floor, felt the heartbeat of the post. For days after, he tried to ignore it. He walked more, talked less, drank water, ate ration crackers. But the rhythm of the tower followed, always present. Inhale, exhale. Even when he held his breath, it didn't. The walls kept expanding. The beams creaked like ribs under strain. One evening, he tried a test. He sat perfectly still, slowed his breathing to a crawl, then stopped, counted silently to 10, and the tower panicked. The floor shuddered. The walls heaved. The radio blurted out gasps of static, and in the corner of the ceiling, dust fell in pulses, like a heart having skipped too many beats. He inhaled, and the tower calmed. From that moment, he understood. He was no longer just living in the post. He was keeping it alive. His lungs were its bellows, his breath its fuel. At midnight, on day 7, he awoke to find a new object at the base of his bed. A stethoscope, old, levitude, military-issue, a tag tied to it for internal diagnostics. He placed the pieces in his ears, pressed the disc to the wall, and heard cries, not screams, not coherent, but the wails of men remembered too long. Some were sobbing, others repeating names, over and over. Bin, 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 T Shin Lee, T. Cha GGC, Vap Chung, TVN, Gak. Every sob aligned with a breath. Every inhale, a new voice. Every exhale, one faded. He stood, rushed outside, collapsed in the sand, breathed in sharp, real air. No voices, no tower, just stars, just silence, just exhale. And in the silence, the sand beneath him rose and fell. Even the island was breathing now. He returned to the tower at dawn. On the wall, etched in soot, you cannot hold your breath. Forever, eventually, the post breathes you in. That night, he dreamt of drowning. Not in water, but in air, too thick to move. The breath of the tower filled his mouth. Asterisk poured into his eyes, wrapped around his lungs like a second skin. And in that breath, he heard his own name whispered, not as a person, but as fuel. Day 22 log, 3 o'clock, respiration, cycle, synchronized, subject, now functioning as auxiliary lung. Emotional resistance, minimal memory saturation at 82%. Tower stable, scratched into the bottom of the metal desk. Asterisk, asterisk, the watch does not breathe. The watch inhales what it breathes in. It never breathes out. Asterisk, asterisk, it started with a soft knock. Not at the door. Not from the walls. From under the bed. 3 taps, slow, hollow. Then silence, thick, leaned over the cot's edge. He expected another message, another trinket, another folder that shouldn't exist. Instead, he saw something pale protruding from the cracked floor, barely visible, caked with dust. It looked like stone at first, but when he touched it, it gave slightly. Not stone, bone. He dug carefully with his hands. The floor resisted at first. The concrete crumbled, wrong, as if covering up something not meant to be seen. Then the dirt gave way, and what he uncovered was unmistakable, a femoren long, smooth, weathered by time but strangely intact, and carved across the length of it, as if etched by a hot blade, was a name, Nugendai Thicus, Ohm. He dropped it, staggered back, his heart hammered against his ribs. No, he whispered. That's not possible. He grabbed the dog tags from his collar, held them next to the bone. Identical. He ran outside, fell to his knees in the sand. The sea didn't move. The air didn't stir. He screamed his name. Once, twice, a third time. Each time the wind carried it away like ash. And then, from the tower, a whisper. Not a voice, a memory. You were buried long ago. What walks now is the log's version. He returned to the cot hours later. The bone still lay where he left it, but now a second object sat beside it, a chisel, old, rusted. And a folded piece of paper. If you forget again, carve it back in. He threw both out the window, returned the bone to the crack, covered it, tried to forget. But the floor wouldn't let him. It moaned when he walked across it, whispered things in the voice he used to have. That night, he refused to sleep in the bed. He lay on the floor instead, but woke to find the cot moved. The femur placed neatly across his chest. A new line carved beside the name, confirmed. He placed it back under the bunk, piled books on top, pushed a crate over the spot, but still, the name followed him, written in condensation on the mirror, spelled out in crumbs, burned into the side of the kettle. Nugendai, thick like the tower was trying to remind him, or worse, convince him, at dawn. He opened the logbook. The page was already filled, but not in ink. In bone dust, pressed into the page, like ashes swept from a cremation pit. It read, Day 23, log, 6 o'clock. AM subject re-identified. Skeletal match confirmed. No further resistance, memory. Loop stable. He dropped the book. The floor beneath him pulsed. He walked outside. The sun greeted him. For a brief moment, he felt warmth. Then he saw it, in the sand behind him. Footprints not fresh, not shallow, fossilized, perfectly preserved. And beside them, a small white PROTRUSION. Another bone, another name, Fem Van Duke, understood. Then that every watcher had left their name, not just in LOGBOOKS, but in the island itself. Their bones were the archive, the foundation, the bedrock. The tower didn't just remember, it was built from remembrance, from remains that night. He sat beside the cot, bone in lap, chisel in hand, and quietly, almost gently, he added a new word beside his name, still here, and the tower sighed in contentment. Day 23, addendum button. Registry updated, identity locked, subject preserved. The post remains inhabited, even by the dead, etched onto the chisel's handle. When the name fades from memory, The marrow keeps it warm. He found it just before dawn, laid out on the rocks where the waves never reached. No footprints led to it, no handprints near, just a military uniform, immaculate dry, as if ironed by sunlight, pressed by silence. Ooks hesitated. It was his size, folded in regulation fashion, belt wrapped twice, boots at attention. On the breast, no rank, no name, only a single stitched phrase, barely visible in faded thread. In case of forgetting, he touched it. The fabric felt wrong. Not new, not old, not even cloth, really, it felt remembered, like it wasn't woven from thread, but from memory itself. He brought it back to the tower, laid it on the cot. It didn't wrinkle, didn't shift in the breeze, and it smelled faintly of salt and regret. That night, he dreamed again. In the dream, he wore the uniform, stood at the edge of the island, looking out at the sea. But every time he looked down at his chest, the patch had changed, and gassy thick then, unknown, and finally, willing he woke to find the uniform on him. He had no memory of dressing, but it fit perfectly, hugged his skin like it had been tailored to his breath. He rushed to the mirror. No reflection, only the uniform, floating mid-air. No face, no eyes, just the posture of duty. He ripped it off, threw it outside, but an hour later, it was back in the room, folded, dry, waiting. The logbook now had a new page, not written in ink, not bone dust, but in thread, woven into the paper like embroidery. Day 24 log, 7 o'clock. Subject accepted the uniform. Confirmation of alignment. Suit integrity, eternal. Memory lock engaged. He tried burning it. The fire went out. He tried burying it. The earth spat it out. He tried throwing it into the sea. The waves washed it back clean, crisp, still folded. One morning, he awoke to find the uniform already on him. He hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, but it was there, and beside his bed, a voice whispered from nowhere, "It remembers the shape of your body better than you do." He checked the mirror again, still no reflection. But now, a second uniform stood behind him, identical. No movement, no eyes, but breathing in rhythm with him. And slowly, it raised its hand in salute. On the tag inside the collar, he finally found a name, the one who remains. Not THX, not Anne, not GC, a title, a role. He accepted it, wore the uniform, walked the perimeter, and the island recognized him. Gates opened, latches clicked, lights blinked gently, and the tower whispered, "The memory is safe again." Later that night, he found an old photograph behind a loose tile, faded 7 soldiers. One wore the uniform, the others didn't. Their faces were blank, but his face was clear, sharp, smiling. Even though the photo was dated 1969. He was born in 2001, but the man in the photo wore his smile, stood like him, and on his patch, Nugent Dithic Day 24 log 2359, uniform bond complete. Identity indexed. Temporal integrity, broken, subject. Exists across all iterations. Status, worn by memory, etched into the belt buckle. The uniform never wears out, only the man does. It began with a question Thick had sat down to write, as always. Same desk, same pen, same old, yellowed logbook. But when he opened to the next blank page, he found a line already written. "Are you sure this is what you meant?" He froze. The ink was fresh. His pen was dry. He hadn't written it, but the handwriting was his. Exactly, even the slight tilt to the left, the habitual underline on the Y. He whispered to the empty room, "What?" And beneath the sentence, a second line appeared, letter by letter. "You've been vague lately." His heart pounded. He flipped back to the last entry, day 24. It had recorded, "Subject confirmed uniform bond." Subject exhibits temporal dissonance. Then, scrawled beneath it, newly appeared. You sounded uncertain. He tried writing. I'm not uncertain. Immediately, the paper responded. Then why do you keep waking up crying? He stood abruptly. The room didn't move. The desk felt colder. The logbook pulsed faintly beneath his fingertips. He flipped further back, to day 18. When he'd written, heard whispers in the kettle. Likely a trick of the heat. Now, next to that line, you knew it wasn't the heat. He flipped to day 12. Slept fine. No disturbances. Newly appeared below it. You lied. The book was correcting him, no, confronting him. As if it had been watching, reading over his shoulder, calling him out, for every half-truth. Every omission, even the ones he hadn't admitted to himself. He closed the book. Waited an hour. Opened it again. A new page. This time, no prompt. Just, you may speak now. He hesitated, then wrote, Who are you? And slowly, the answer came. I am the memory that does not fade. The witness that does not sleep. The one who stays when the breath has gone. He wrote, the tower. No, the island. No, then what? You, eventually. He slammed the book shut. But still, he heard it. A rustle on the desk. As if the pages were turning themselves, flipping forward, flipping backward, searching for him the next morning. The cover had changed. Instead of the simple leather texture, there was now a new, embossing faint, nearly invisible under angled light, a face. His, mouth closed, eyes open, staring, but carved not as a photograph, more like a memory fading mid-thought. He opened to the next page. A new sentence waited. Would you like to revise your story? He wrote nothing, and the book continued without him. Day 25 log. 6:01 a.m. Subject is resisting narrative convergence. Doubt has returned. Self-recognition at 91%. The book will guide. The book will finish what the man fears to say. Asterisk, asterisk, he stepped away. Sat on the cot, but the book kept writing. Soft scratching, pages turning. He watched from across the room as the pen, untouched, hovered above the paper and continued moving. It wasn't floating, it was held by something not seen, but always present. The same force that had written him into the logs before he'd arrived. The same whisper that had signed his name into bone. He approached again. One final question. Can I leave? The book paused, then answered, No, but you can become someone new. He wrote, someone else. The response, no. Someone remembered. That night, when he returned from patrol, the book had changed again. It no longer recorded events in the past tense. Instead, day 25, log 2307. He walks in now. He looks at the book. He reads these words. He wonders how we knew. Asterisk, asterisk, thick, dropped the book. Looked around, alone, and yet, seen, etched into the back cover. This is not a record of what happened. It is a rehearsal for what always happens. It started with a delivery crate, marked Naval Archive, classified for post-echo. Heavy. Dusty, no sender, no date. Inside colon, old paperwork. Sun-bleached photos, a sealed metal tube, and within the tube, Map Fuchs unrolled it across the desk. It creaked like something exhaling. A Navy chart, detailed, dense, aged in salt and silence. Lattice of currents, coordinates marked in faded red ink, labeled colon, South China Sea, strategic zones. 1975, he scanned for the archipelago, for the reefs, for point echo dot nothing. The sea stretched wide and empty. Not a single dot of land, no island, no tower, not even a rock. Just waves, currents, currents, BLANKNESS. He double-checked the coordinates, burned into the tower's entry plate, then matched them to the chart. exactly where this island stood. Where he stood, the map read, unnavigable. No known mass. He blinked. Checked again. Still. No known mass. He opened the logbook. Wrote, found map. No island marked. And the page responded, correct. The island does not appear. He wrote, but it's here, to you. He paused. Then wrote, to whom else? To the remembered. To the ones still being watched. He turned the map over. On the back, handwritten in pencil, there is a sea that forgets, and an island that insists. He stared at the chart for hours, measured the lines, cross-checked with older logs, then scanned the entire region. Nothing, not a single documented post, no record of habitation, as if the entire existence of Point Echo had been erased, or written only for him. That night, he took the map outside, held it to the wind, watched the stars above, triangulated with the few constellations. He knew he matched their positions. The orientation was right. The sky knew the island, but the sea beneath refused to admit it. He dug deeper in the crate, found naval memos, mission reports, most shredded, some smudged, but one memo stood out, clean. Recent it read, to whom it may concern Post Echo is to remain off dash chart. Do not update records, do not update records, do not reference location. Memories recorded here are non-exportable. Retention is internal. Repeat, island is for memory, not for history. He copied it into the logbook, and the book wrote back, acknowledged, you were off record. He walked to the edge of the island, faced the sea, and for the first time, felt it watching him. Not the sky, not the tower, but the water. Like it knew he wasn't supposed to be there, or worse, that he always had been. He dipped his hand into the waves. They pulled back, not violently, but politely, like a host refusing entry. And from the deep, he thought he heard it again. You cannot go home. There is no record of your departure. Back inside, he found the map had curled in on itself. The edges burned black, but cold to the touch. Where the sea had once been drawn, now remained only a phrase. There is no land here, only the ones who refuse to sink. He tried to redraw the island onto the chart, but the ink refused to settle. Each line, blurred dot, ran dot, evaporated as if the paper rejected truth or feared it. Day 26. Log 5:57 a.m. Subject discovered, cartographic absence. Island status, existence unconfirmed. Memory acknowledged, history denied. Subject persists, etched into the crate lid. They can't find you if you never existed, but you'll still remember. The stairs were never there before. Behind the rusted cabinet on the 3rd floor, a panel had swung open. No lock, no creak, just space, and a metal spiral staircase, ascending into a part of the tower he'd never seen. He climbed slowly, one floor, then another. The concrete gave way to steel, then steel to glass, until he emerged into a round chamber, entirely transparent, like a lighthouse built of mirrors and memory at its center. A large beam light, still unlit, pointed, not outward to the sea, but downward, through a column of glass that pierced every floor of the post, reaching all the way to the bunk room. The bone, the desk, the logbook. A single switch waited beside it. Unlabeled, he hesitated, then flicked it. Light burst down the tower, not white, not red, but blue, like the kind that follows when your eyes close too tight. When you press against memory too hard. It passed through the rooms, through the floor, through him. But instead of casting shadows, it cast images, not on the walls, not on the ground. In his mind, memories, not his men he'd never met, watchers he'd never met, watchers he'd never kept, islands he'd never landed on, and yet, He remembered them all. The scent of rust, the feel of wet boots, the sound of waves slapping wood as a voice whispered, "Still Gak, still Gak." Then he saw himself. Not now, not in uniform, but as a boy. Crying under mosquito netting, holding a cassette, a voice on tape saying, "B-N Psi, Huo, Gak, Ki, Mkhan, Engon, Cha, BNBEA." And suddenly, it wasn't memory, it was reality. He was hearing it again, not remembering. The lighthouse had become a projector, not of light, but of truth. Each pulse of the beam triggered a wave of recollection. His father's hands, rough. From salt, a letter never sent. A promise broken. Not out of betrayal, but out of duty. Then, new images, the moment he signed the volunteer paper, believing it was about bravery. But the memory said, otherwise he had signed it because, if I vanish, here no one will expect me to come back. The beam shifted, now. The light wasn't blue, it was grey, not a colour. A weight, it turned his thoughts opaque. He saw versions of himself. One who never volunteered, one who died at sea, one who stayed home, married, lived, and forgot. And the light asked silently, which of you was real? The tower didn't answer. The beam dimmed. Silence returned. He reached to switch it off, but it clicked before his fingers. Touched it, as if it knew he'd seen enough. On the glass wall, words had formed from condensation. To see the way forward, one must look where the light refuses to reach. He descended the stairs. Each level of the post felt different, as if the light had left traces, small imprints in air and shadow at his desk. The logbook had opened to a new page. Day 27. Log, 6 o'clock, a lighthouse sequence, complete, internal. Projection stabilized. Subject viewed full memory tree. Identity root, established. Reaction, grief, acceptance, integration. He sat, looked at the map again. Still no island, but now, he didn't need it. The island wasn't on the sea. It was in the Watcher. A structure built not from stone, but from choices never taken, from voices never forgotten that night. He dreamed not of the post, but of a world where it had never existed, and woke crying for something could know. Longer imagine forgetting. Etched into the floor at the lighthouse's base, the beam does not guide ships, it guides memory home. It appeared without warning, at the base of the tower, behind the old water tank, where rust dripped like tears. A wall that had always been solid, now had a seam, and in the center of that seam, a bronze handle. No lock, no key, just a single phrase, engraved, for when you were ready. He didn't touch it for 3 days. He slept beside it, ate beside it, spoke to it, but it said nothing, and that, somehow, made it speak louder than anything else in the post. On the 4th night, he finally placed his hand on the handle. It was warm, alive. He turned it. No click, no creak, only softness, as if the door had been waiting. Not resisting, it swung open, inside coal and darkness, but not empty, not void. The kind of darkness that listens. He stepped in, the door closed behind him. No light, no echo. But then, from somewhere near, or maybe inside him, a voice, "You've seen enough." It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't loud. It was gentle, like water touching sand. And it spoke in his father's voice. He froze. B-N, silence. Then again, the voice, same tone, but not the same words. "This is the part we never wrote down." A dim glow began to rise. But it didn't illuminate the room, it illuminated him, his face, his eyes, his choices, projected in midair. Moments from his life, played backward. Each one labeled, each one indexed like a file. The day he lied to stay, the letter he never sent, the memory he chose to forget. He watched, helpless. The voice continued. The tower isn't here to trap you, it's here to hold you, until you remember the weight of your own silence. More images appeared. The time he turned away from his brother's tears, the time he laughed at someone else's fear, the time he said, "I'm fine," and meant the opposite. He dropped to his knees. "I didn't mean to forget," he whispered, and the voice replied, "That's not what we're here for. We're not here to judge, we're here to witness." Then the room shifted. The walls fell away. He was standing on the sea, no island, no sky, just water as far as the eye could see. And in front of him, a figure, silhouetted, wearing the same uniform, same posture, but no face, only a mirror. Where a face should be, he approached, and the mirror whispered, "Your name is not the one they gave you. It is the one you carved yourself when no one was looking." He stared, saw flashes of himself as child, soldier, man, ghost. All in one glance. The sea rippled underfoot, not threatening, inviting. The figure stepped aside, revealing a chair, old, wooden, familiar, exactly like the one his father used to sit in when recording messages for home. He sat, and the mirror leaned close. "Now, speak, not to me, not to them, to you," he hesitated, then whispered, "I was afraid." The sea responded, not with waves, but with warmth. The mirror glowed his face, aged then young again, then aged once more, until finally it stopped. His face, not as he remembered it, but as it actually was. No mask, no posture, just truth. Day 28 log. No timestamp. Subject entered. The room of one opening. Identity accepted. Silence broken. Subject finally heard. Tower holds the echo. Transmission ends for now. Etched into the inside of the door. We open only once, but we listen forever. The sea rose on the 30th night. No storm, no wind, just a swell like something beneath had turned, awakened, remembered. Fuchs stood at the edge of the tower, letter in one hand, logbook in the other. He had written everything, his name, his father's name, the things they shared, the silences they passed down like inheritance. Now, there was nothing left to write, and yet the logbook stayed open, waiting. The light on the horizon had come closer. Not a ship, not a flare, but a shape, pale, slow, human. A figure walking across the water. As it approached, the waves parted like breath around a body. No sound, only stillness. When it reached the island's shore, it stopped and raised a hand. Not in greeting, not in warning, in recognition. Ducheks descended the stairs, barefoot, the letter tucked into his shirt. He stepped onto the sand, faced the figure. It had no face, just a mirror, like the one in the room. That opens only once. But now the mirror was cracked, and inside the cracks, stars. "You have remembered," the voice said, not aloud, in him. He nodded, and now he whispered, "Now you choose." Behind him, the tower shimmered, not flickering, changing. The concrete peeled like memory. The steel supports vanished, like breath, until all that remained was a beam of light, floating in the shape of a tower, pulsing like a heartbeat. "You can go back," the voice said, "but you'll forget again. Or you can stay, and we'll never forget." He looked toward the sea, the map that never showed this place, the sky that never asked questions. Then back to the tower. It was calling, not to keep him, but to carry him. He asked, "What happens if I stay?" "You become the light, and if I go, you become the silence." He stepped forward, touched the figure's hand. It felt like holding a goodbye. The figure smiled, though it had no mouth, and whispered, "Your father stayed, so you wouldn't have to." He closed his eyes, let the wind pass through him. And when he opened them again, the sea had returned. The figure was gone, and the tower gone too. No post, no bone, no echo, just sand, and a single untouched logbook. He picked it up. A final entry had appeared. Day 30 log, 5:55 a.m. Subject has chosen, memory preserved, transmission complete. The watcher has become the light. All stations silent. All echoes returned. End, and beneath that, scratched faintly by something older than ink, where the light goes to die, is where the truth begins to live. Epilogue optional. Years later, a naval patrol discovers an unmarked island. No structures, no signs of life, only a rusted tin box under the sand inside. A letter to whom it may concern. If you're reading this, it means the island let you find it. That means it wants you to remember. Read carefully, and if you hear the knock, answer it this time. The end.